Hey there Space Cats, it's me Jules back in the studio. It's currently Betwixtmas, the 30th of December today, and I've been away really probably since about Christmas Eve, so almost an entire week away from the studio, and I was beginning to get a little bit crazy. So I decided to bring myself in, open the old Inktense pencils up and draw something that makes me feel a little bit more hopeful towards springtime. And that is, I saw a photograph of a black cat that was just sitting by some flowers, and I thought, ooh, I'd quite like to do that and see what it looks like in Inktense. So here I am with a charcoal black, and I think that's a fuchsia, and you'll see a bit later on I actually made a different decision about that nose and mouth, so we'll come to that in a moment. But this is just me colouring in some of the cat, and of course his eyes and the yellowy bit. I think I used sienna for this colour of his irises, and just giving him a little bit of definition, although what I really wanted was for him to be more of a silhouette. And there's my amazing palette of Inktense that I was gifted. The flowers in the picture were that fleabane, so there's lots of pinks and whites and a little bit of yellow for the centre, lots of green. So I sort of took inspiration from that. Sorry about the weird focusing, by the way, it kept wanting to focus on my hand rather than on the actual picture, drat you. But thankfully I managed to edit most of that out. So I've picked up loads of different pinks and purples, and I just really wanted to do these 4 little petaled leaves, and then a little bit of green behind, just to give you a bit of context for the plants to be sitting in. If you like drawing and painting videos, then I do loads of those, so make sure you give me a like, subscribe and ding the little bell next to it so you get all of my notifications. You'll also find out everything you ever wanted to know about making picture books. I like to build my pictures up with a little bit of Dottage. So that's some dots in different colours. I think that always sort of shows like maybe the bud of a flower beginning to come through. And then in with some greens, and in a moment you'll see the mess I made up of choosing a green and not putting it back where I should have done. A little bit of grass for the cat to be sitting on. And if you haven't used Inktense pencils before, you'll see when you add that they're water based, and when you add water to them, the colour becomes really saturated and zingy. So whilst I was doing these green bits, I looked at the mouth and I thought I just wasn't sure that was quite right. So when it's all dried a bit, I'm going to go over that with some more of the charcoal black. And I really like the way you can see the brush marks within these watercolour pencils. I've used watercolour pencils a lot before. I used to have Caran d'Ache ones, but these are very superior, I think, for what I want to be doing with my watercolour pencils. And I've actually probably used these pencils more than watercolour in the last few years. It's just a nice, easy way to create some beautiful colour. Sometimes I use it alongside my watercolour, so there's a bit of both coming in, but I think the crucial thing is to get some decent brushes. So quite often, a couple of times a year, I treat myself to some new brushes. They're not always the best quality brushes, but just having a new, well tapered tip is quite important for me to get those little details going. And as I was going around the mouth, this is kind of where I was looking at that little nose. I do like a pink nose, but I just felt in this particular drawing just didn't feel quite right. It felt a bit muddy. So after the first swing by with the brush, I decided that I would probably go over that little nose and mouth. And this again is that charcoal grey that I'm just activating with some water. So that's all I've got on my brush is water. And you can see those texture marks underneath. As it dries, you'll see that it does leave that lovely sort of watery mark. just wanted to pop in here and say a massive thank you for all your support in the last year. It's been a tricky year, and so many of you have made some very positive and heartfelt comments to me, and I really do appreciate that so much. And the new subscribers, well, hello to you, and I hope you stick with me. If I could come round and make every 23,000 of you, or whatever it is these days, a cup of tea and a biscuit, you know I would. And this is the point where I messed up a bit. Instead of picking up the charcoal grey, I picked up that green, which I meant to sharpen because the end was getting a bit knackered. And I put green on him, so he looks like he's going mouldy. But it was really hard to tell because I was sitting underneath that quite harsh light. It was quite hard to tell, and I couldn't even tell when I'd done the whiskers. But there we go, he's got a little green head. Eventually I did manage to figure out what I'd done around about here when I started to cover in that nose and thought, that's quite a strange colour. So I did go back, found my charcoal grey and redid that a little bit, and it looks a lot better. But if you look really carefully, you can see that he's got kind of slightly green whiskers. I was thinking to myself, just a little more texture, and then putting those whiskers right once it had dried a bit, making the eyes nice and big, giving him blacker pupils. Tiny bit of water just to activate that. And I quite like his little white blob on his chest as well. I know a cat just like that, so I think that's quite cute. Look at the end of his tail, I like that bit. Yeah, pretty pleased with that.